This story is about how we often learn of something we never knew had happened, only until once we've grown up. This is the story of John, whose family relationship has changed because of these things. I'd like to tell you a story about when I was a kid and almost got killed. I was 3 years old at the time. My mother was still in the hospital when my sister was born. My father and I were on our way home from visiting them. But I was 3 years old, and I don't remember what had happened then. It wasn't until I was older that my father told me. I was very young and couldn't stand to be in the hospital room with my mother for so long. I would immediately start gagging, much to my parents' chagrin. The hospital where my mother was hospitalized was a small obstetrics and gynecology clinic, so there was no convenience store in the hospital. I was walking home from the convenience store with my father when I was ran over by a guy in motorcycle who came up behind us. The guy on the bike fell down once, but quickly got up and ran away. They called an ambulance and took me to a big hospital nearby. Fortunately, there were no broken bones, but my niece was cut and I had to get some stitches. I vaguely remember that time. I still have the scars from the stitches though. I heard that I was hospitalized for about 3 days for examination, just to be sure, but they caught the hit and run driver during that time. He was a man about my parents' age. When I came home, my mother and sister had also been discharged from the hospital. After that, we were all together at home, but my father and mother were acting strangely. They seemed to be fighting while I was sleeping. Night after night after night. It was like they were arguing about something. They didn't talk much in front of us anymore, and even as a kid, I thought, something bad is going on. Because there was such an atmosphere in the house, I unconsciously developed the habit of reading the atmosphere. I think I was always looking at my parents' faces. We didn't go out anywhere as a family anymore. On weekends, I often went to the park with my mother or to a family restaurant. I used to ask my mother the same question, as she would give me the same answer.
Is Dad working? Yes, he's busy. I see.
Now that I think about it, my parents didn't get along, and they never went out together. But I really thought Dad was busy working until they got divorced. I was with my mom all the time, and I grew to hate my dad more and more. He was unfriendly, he didn't speak kindly to me, and he often spoke harshly to my mother. I guess that life had reached its limits, and when I was 5 years old, my parents divorced. My father got custody of me, and my mother got custody of my sister. I hated my father, so I went to live with my mother.
John, you're going to live with your dad.
Why? I want to live with Mom. Why can't I?
I'm sorry, but I can't take you with me.
I don't want to be with Dad. I cried to my mother, but she just cried and apologized, and there was nothing she could do. I was so affected by not being able to live with my mother that it continued to haunt me in elementary and junior high school. Why couldn't I live with my mother? Why can't my sister live with me? Maybe I was an unwanted child. I really thought about a lot of things. All the while, I hated my father, and our relationship wasn't going well. He was a brusque, foul-mouthed man, and he never listened to a word I wanted to say. Eventually, I got to the point where I thought, I'm a failure because of my father. He said, "What's wrong here?" Years went by like that, and I turned 20. On the day I came back home from a small party, I found my father waiting for me with a bottle of alcohol. "What's going on?" "You've come of age, so I thought we could have a drink together." I remember I was quite surprised when my father, who was usually so blunt, said something like that. After the two of us toasted, my father started talking nervously. And there's something I want to talk to you about.
What is it?
Take a look at this.
He showed me a picture of my mother, my sister, and a man I didn't know. This man, who...
That's him. The guy who ran you over.
What? Why is he in the picture with Mom and Samantha? I was confused, but my father told me a story about that time. He told me that he found out about my mother's affair just before my sister was born. However, since they were going to have a baby soon, he said they were going to think about the future after that. My father had no intention of divorcing Mom because they already have me. But my mother wanted to divorce my father and marry the other man. Since I got in the way of the divorce, she tried to make it look like a hit and run and try to kill me. I don't know how that's possible. I'm her own child. The man who actually ran me over was her affair partner, and he thought it would be a good idea to also get my father involved in the accident. Then, he could remarry my mother without anyone getting in the way. But while I was in the hospital, the married man was arrested and went to jail. My father was furious when he found out that that guy had almost killed me. He thought that if he didn't divorce my mother right away, my life would be in danger. In the end, they got divorced without a hitch, even though it took a long time. I didn't know that, so I feel bad now that I'd said I don't want my dad when they were getting divorced. My father also wanted to get custody of my sister, but that didn't happen. The affair partner recently got out of prison and remarried my mother, who had been waiting for a few years. I'm so sorry I messed up your life. No, I'm sorry I've said bad things to you too. I never thought that would happen. No, if only I'd been stronger. My father cried as he said these things. I felt sorry for my father, thinking that it must have been hard for him to not be able to tell anyone. I want to be a better son to him from now on. Thanks to this conversation, my father and I were able to repair our relationship and become closer than ever before. I felt better now that I knew what had been going on, but I was worried about whether my sister was doing okay. I was worried that my sister might be treated like an obstacle by the people who would try to kill a 3-year-old child, just because I was in their way. The last time I saw her was when my parents divorced. I was curious, but she might not want to see me, so I was a little hesitant. My dad seemed to know where my mom lived though, so maybe he would have told me if I asked. I was concerned about my sister, but I didn't take any action. A year passed before I realized it. I was getting used to my job, and by this time, I was going fishing with my father and enjoying my hobbies. It was as if the strained relationship we had before was a lie, and we were living in harmony. Then one day, it was raining and we had to cancel our fishing trip. As I was relaxing at home with nothing in particular to do, I just left the afternoon news running on the TV. It's already late. I should cook lunch. As I stood in the kitchen, the news was reporting about an elevator accident that had happened a few hours earlier. The newscaster was broadcasting live in front of the building where the accident had occurred, and a crowd of people had gathered around the building. According to the news, a wire snapped during the maintenance in one of the buildings, crushing a worker who was inspecting the elevator in the basement and killing him. Wow, what a terrible accident. I didn't know such things could happen. As my father and I were talking about this, the name of the dead worker was reported. When my father heard that, his face turned pale. Oh, no way. What's wrong? No, it's nothing. He said it was nothing, but he was acting strangely. I wondered if it was an acquaintance of his, so I decided to check. Then my father changed the channel on the TV and started checking the news on the other stations.
All the stations were covering the elevator accident that had just occurred, and various announcers were out on the scene of the accident. As I was watching the news on one station, a picture of the dead worker's face was reported. I vaguely recognized the face. Who was it? I thought back to a picture my father had shown me when I was 20 years old. I remembered, and I couldn't help but exclaim, "No way!" Yes, the worker was a man who had run me over. I looked at my father, who was looking at the TV with a very pale face. "John, this guy, right?" "I think so too." "And the name, no doubt." And my father said, "Well, he's got the name right, word for word, so I'm sure of it." I never thought I'd see it on the news." "Should I call my mom?" "No, you don't have to." "I see." I felt kind of upset, like I had said something strange. But when I thought about it, I realized that it's because she was the one who also tried to kill me. Of course, I didn't have to do that. I wasn't that worried about my mother, but I was worried about my sister's future. One day, a week after the accident, my mother called my father. For some reason, my mother told my father that the guy had died in the accident. To my father, he was my mother's affair partner, and more importantly, he was the one who ran me over. There was no way he would be interested in hearing her talk. I'm sure she's in trouble now that the guy was dead. Now she's talking about alimony from the divorce. "So, I have something important to tell you." "What the hell? Now, I don't have anything to do with you." "What? Oh, I remember when you didn't pay me any alimony. You told me you were divorcing me, so you're the one who's supposed to pay alimony." "What? How many decades ago are you talking about? It was your fault, so there's no way I'm paying." "It doesn't matter how many decades ago it was. I went through a lot because of the divorce. And because of the divorce, I had to raise our child alone." "That's because you had an affair. You deserved it." "Shut up. Just pay alimony and child support." Even my father, who usually doesn't shout, lost his temper at my mother's arrogance. "What are you talking about? You tried to kill your own son. Don't call me just because your new husband is dead. You and I are strangers now." I was nearby and was startled by the fierceness of his words. I had never seen my father so loud and angry. After hanging up the phone and regaining his composure, my father told me the details of the divorce. He was actually entitled to alimony, but out of mercy, he let her go without having to pay alimony or child support. He said he couldn't believe that my mother would contact us after all this time. Well, it was my mother's infidelity that caused it. By the way, he had a detective agency check that she had a relationship with the other man before I was born. I was worried for a moment that I might be the guy's child, but my father denied it. My father had doubts about it for a while, so he had a DNA test done on me and my sister. Incidentally, my father said that there was a time when he wanted to turn my mother into the police after the hit-and-run incident, but he decided against it because he could see the trouble my sister would go through. And that would make her the daughter of a criminal. If Dad had gotten custody of my sister, I'm sure my mother would have been caught too. We were just worried about my sister after we found out they're in financial trouble when my mother contacted us. It was just a little chance for me to reconnect with her. I'll tell you that story now. 2 years later, when I was 23 years old, the turning point came. One Sunday, I was cleaning up the house when the intercom rang. I rushed to answer it, and there was a girl of about 20 years old standing at the door. I wasn't sure, but I thought she looked like the girl in the picture my father had shown me.
"Hello."
"Oh, are you?"
"I'm Samantha."
I knew it.
I was just standing there, watching the whole thing happen. My sister continued talking while looking at me.
I'm sorry for coming out of the blue. I just wanted to confirm something with Dad.
Okay, wait here for a while. After that, I woke up my father, who was taking a nap on the sofa in the living room. My father was quite surprised to see me out of the blue, but he seemed quite happy to see his daughter, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. So, what did you want to talk about?
Actually, it's about my mother.
Then, she began to talk. She had no memory of her father since she was a small child, and she had been with our mom until she married her affair partner. When she was little, she asked, "Why don't I have a daddy?" She was quite sad. Then, when she asked about her father when she was in junior high school, she was told that he left because he cheated. At the time, she didn't doubt what she'd been told, and to be honest, they were struggling to make ends meet on my mother's earnings alone, and she thought it was my father's fault that they were living like that. So before long, my sister began to resent my father as a terrible man who abandoned my mother. My sister started to question my mother's story after the death of the other man in the accident. At that time, she was 18 years old and knew more, so she realized that there was something wrong with her mother's story. What did you find strange?
First of all, I thought it was strange that her father had custody of you. It's usually hard for fathers to get custody, but that's when I noticed there was something wrong with what our mother said.
That's true.
And she also said that when she divorced her father, she didn't get any alimony or anything. I was wondering why she didn't get any money, since she definitely wanted it. I thought maybe she had something to feel guilty about, and that's why she divorced.
I'm surprised you thought that far. I'm glad Samantha is a smart girl. My father, impressed by my sister's cleverness, began to tell her the truth. My mother hadn't told my sister about my hit-and-run accident, and she was quite shocked when she heard that the guy was the culprit. It was certainly a dramatic story that the man she had lived with for years had tried to kill her brother. My mother was the one who actually tried to get rid of me and cheat on our dad with the other man. When I told her that our father was so livid that he was going to divorce her, she said,
"That's not at all what I heard."
"You know, Dad and I were worried that you might have gotten in trouble at your place."
I was not being abused or anything, so I'm fine. It just seemed like I was an obstacle in the life of our mother and her affair partner.
Speaking of which, how did you get this address?
It was on Mom's phone. I wondered whose address it was, but you know how Mom called you 2 years ago? That's how I knew for sure. So I figured I'd come to see you when I came of age. I wanted to know the truth and...
I see. In the end, my sister couldn't tolerate the lies my mother had been telling her, and she said she'd take this opportunity to break it off. My sister's an adult now, old enough to make her own decisions. After talking it over, she's going to live with us in our house. I feel like the house is brighter now that she's around. I actually thought that maybe my dad felt awkward, but he seems to be happy every day. Then, my father, sister, and I decided to celebrate her birthday. We each bought a side dish that we wanted to eat, and there were beers on the table as well. I never thought I'd see the day when we'd be able to spend time together as a family, drinking and having fun. My sister did not return to my mother's house after that. She had a lot on her mind. When that guy passed away, she was planning to go to college, but my mother told her, "You have to work." So she gave up the plan in tears. She had something she wanted to do, so she studied hard for the entrance exam and finally passed. But she wasn't able to enroll. My sister gave up on higher education to work, but my mother was just loafing around every day, so they had many fights. My sister was working as a freelancer, and she was putting most of the money from her part-time jobs into the house. but my father made her stop it. It's true that my mom can't make ends meet because she deserved it. But my sister doesn't have to work hard to support her. From now on, I'd like her to use the money she works for herself. My sister still wants to do what she wants to do, and she said she wants to save up money to study abroad. I hope she can still do what she wants to do, even though she was unable to go to college. I thought it was kind of cool that she never gives up on her dream, no matter what the circumstances. By the way, my mother wondered why my sister, who was the breadwinner, didn't come back to their house and contacted us. When Samantha accused my mother of lying about everything, for some reason, she got upset and said, "You're not my child anymore." Then, my sister said, "Yes, I understand. Take care," and hung up the phone. She still received a ton of calls and texts after that. There were messages like, "I'm sorry. Mom was wrong. I can't imagine being without you. I apologize. Please come home." Stuff like that. She doesn't really want me to come home. She just needs someone to make money for her. She said that, but I agree. My sister, my father, and I agree that our mother was that kind of person, and we all laughed. Apparently after that, my mother lived alone in their house and there was garbage lying around. My mother seems to have aged to the point where you'd think she was a different person. She seems to be living on welfare now. Well, we don't have anything to do with her anymore. So, thank you for listening. I hope to be able to be a good family member to my father and my sister. We're going to enjoy our life together because we haven't been able to spend time together for many years. John's family has been separated from him for a long time. Now that they know the truth, a new family life is about to begin. We will continue to introduce interesting and honest stories from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll be waiting for you in the next video. Thank you for watching.